hello. Welcome to another episode of Prodigy Search Presents. It's a great honor, tremendous privilege to have a dear friend of mine, Dr. Sarah Hillyer, who is the director of the University of Tennessee Center for Sport, Peace, and Society, which also manages the Global Sports Mentoring Program on behalf of the United States Department of State. Extremely impressive program, which we're going to walk through a little bit, with Sarah during our conversation over the next 20, 30 minutes, but I'm going to embarrass her a little bit and read, because she's very humble and won't tell that her story as good as perhaps is written. So I'm just going to briefly read a couple sentences from the bio. Sarah wants to live in a world filled with freedom of movement, innovative ideas, thoughtful people, and inspiring books, films, and creative media projects that tell the real life stories of everyday sporty heroes, creating a more just, equitable, and free world. Much smarter than I am, she received her doctoral degree in socio-cultural study of sports from the UT, University of Tennessee, holds a master's degree in sports psychology from Murray State, undergrad from degree in sports administration from Liberty University, and Division I NC2A basketball player from Virginia Tech. So very, very impressive bio in a very short order, but tell us a little bit about Doctor, just a little bit of your background that perhaps I didn't touch on. I'm going to talk about the center and the building of that, but tell us just a quick intro in terms of yourself and what drives you and what motivates you day to day.
Sure. Well, I grew up in a metropolis called Bald Knob, Kentucky, population 800.
Wow. Wow, there you go. Fun fact.
That's exactly right. So there wasn't a lot to do. I think we were 25 or 30 minutes away from the nearest gas station or grocery store or any part of civilization, which was a gift, right? Because my family and we just played sports. We played baseball, and American football, and basketball together. And I was probably, I say this, I grew up on the heels of Title IX. I was born in 1971. And so I was very fortunate and benefited from that. And I was probably going into the 8th grade when my dad said, "Hey, Sarah, did you know that you can get a scholarship? You can get access to great education through sports now?" I said, "No, I had no idea." And he said, "Well, would you want to go to college? Would you want to go to a good school and maybe sports could be your job?" And I said, "Absolutely." And he said, "Okay, then we've got some decisions to make. You play baseball on an all-boys team. You play American football with all boys. You play basketball with mostly boys, but some girls." And this was the most empowering moment for me when I look back, in retrospect. My dad gave me the choice. He said, "If you want to do it, you're going to have to make it like your job. But you're going to need to pick and focus on one. You can play all of them, but you really need to focus on one. Which one do you want to play?" And so I had the power to choose, and he was supportive. Luckily, I had the wits about me to pick basketball. I don't think I would have made it far in baseball or American football in the 70s.
Never know.
But nonetheless, that really was the beginning of a love of sport and the value of sport in my life, and was really the foundation.
Well, good for you, and went on to, in fact, I had that discussion just earlier today about somebody and talking about diversity, inclusion, and trying to keep that in the core of what we do, and letting individuals know across all aspects that there's a career in sport beyond playing, right? And there's thousands and thousands and millions of women and men and young boys and girls who want to play professionally, but 1% or so will make it to the very highest level. And so the other 99%, there's a great career in sport. And
absolutely.
To your point. And, making everybody continue to be aware of the outgrowth of where sport provides them that opportunity.
Absolutely.
So tell us about, the Center for Sport, Peace, and Society. You've got an impressive background and a bio leading into that, but launched, you got your doctorate from the University of Tennessee. Did you launch the program in 2012? The center in 2012, is that right? The date?
That's exactly right.
Tell us a little bit about it, because I think it's under promoted, because that's your modesty. It's an impressive program, and we'll talk about that and the Global Sports Mentoring Program. But talk a little bit about the formation launching it in 2012, and a little bit about, the purpose and what the center does.
Sure. It will require a little background, but I think your audience, many people can relate. And if there are any parents who are watching this, who have a son or a daughter that's an athlete, I particularly want to share the background and how the center happened, because launching in 2012, the story of it goes back all the way to 1993, if you don't mind. So as you mentioned, I played basketball at Virginia Tech. I ended up transferring to Liberty and finishing there. And the reason I transferred is because I had a psychotic basketball coach who used particularly for me, used my weight, how much I weighed, as a psychological controlling mechanism. And I get the value of weighing in and your BMI and all of that in sports. But let me tell you, she took this in a direction that was really, really abusive. 5 o'clock every morning, I would get a call from the trainer to come and weigh in.
Wow.
But the kicker was they never told me how much I needed to weigh every day. And the number changed every day. So if I didn't make weight at 5 in the morning, I could come back at 3 in the afternoon before our afternoon practice or pregame meal. And if I made weight at 3, then I could dress out or play or practice. So you can imagine, as a student athlete, my education, a free access to education, I wanted to compete, and I didn't want to let my parents down. And so on the days that I didn't make weight in the morning, I would skip my classes. I would go to the student rec center, and I would bike and run in a garbage bag suit all day long so I could make weight at 3. So the importance of this story is that when I graduated, not only did I graduate with a degree in sports administration, I graduated with a really unhealthy relationship to food. So much so that when I walked across the stage and got my diploma from, at the time, was Jerry Falwell, I didn't go sit back down with my classmates. I walked straight up the stadium stairs, got in my parents' car, and we drove 8 hours home to Kentucky. And I told my parents that day, I will never, ever, ever have anything to do with sports again the rest of my life.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I was so scared. I was so broken. So my parents were loving and kindly and gently reminded me that sounds good in theory, but I do have a degree in sports administration. It might come back around. But for the next year, they let me live at home, and we worked through a lot of things. And I woke up one morning during that year, and it was so clear. And I hadn't had clarity of thought in a long time. It was, a very sickly thinking. And the thought was, wait a minute, Sarah, sport didn't do this to you. Basketball didn't do this to you. It's what someone in a position of power did. And if she had the power to take away your confidence and your identity as an athlete and your joy and love of sport, Sarah, you have the power to give that to people. So what are you doing? Get up and give it to people.
Yeah.
And so that was the start. So at that point, I started a nonprofit called Sport for Peace. And the idea was to use sport as a tool to promote inner peace, understanding that our identity is not in what we do. Our identity is in something much higher, a much higher calling. So as an athlete, that's not my identity. That's just what I do. And so Sport for Peace was inner peace, but then also I wanted to engage student athletes and get them outside our bubbles of competitive sport, especially at the NCAA Division I level, and travel the world and find out all the things we have in common with women around the world who are also athletes. And so I did that for 15 years, wow, funded by lemonade stands, bake sales, and car washes. So that was actually the impetus for the center. And the reason is work was opening up with partners in Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Tunisia, Morocco, Israel, Palestine, places where women weren't really engaging with other women and of all things sports. And so eventually I couldn't fund the scale of what was happening. I couldn't sell enough brownies and wash enough cars. And I thought, how in the world am I going to get more money? I guess I'm going to have to go back to school and learn how to do research and how to write a grant. So at that point, I had already had my master's in sports psychology, and I thought, well, there's only one level left, and that's a PhD. And it terrified me because I'm not an academic. I'm a coach, I'm a communicator, I'm not a researcher. And there were two programs that had sports sociology. One was at Ball State in Indiana. The other was at the University of Tennessee. Obviously, with Pat Summitt being here, I chose the University of Tennessee. So I was 36 years old when I came back to get my PhD, all with the intent of learning how to write a grant.
Really?
So when I was here, I was in a research seminar and had every intention of going back to Sport for Peace, when during the research seminar, I thought, or I could stay in higher education and begin to change the way we approach all sport-based curriculum, whether you're studying kinesiology or sport psych or sport management, so that sport and social good, sport and social impact is not just one chapter in a 4-year degree or one lesson in a PhD program, but it becomes the heart and soul of what we do and why we do sport. Yes, it can be used for business, and there's nothing wrong with that. But why can't those businesses be infused with the good things that sport can do for the world? That was the moment in the research seminar that I wrote a proposal for a center at the University of Tennessee to begin to do this in higher education.
That's part of your
and that
doctorate.
was the birth of the center.
So that was your research and part of your doctorate that was going to launch the center.
You know, I didn't even use it as my research. I just, after that research seminar, wrote a proposal, gave it to my dean and said, I think we need to do this. I think we need to change the world this way, and it needs to happen here.
Wow. Wow. That's powerful. So 2012, 8 years later, you've had some tremendous growth in what you've done and your impact, and we could go on forever because there's some massive projects you've done around the globe. You talked about the Middle East and Jordan and Israel, and you know, I know there's a documentary out that I think was part of called Pat, A Legacy of Love, and I know that I think you originally filmed that over in, was it Iran or Iraq?
Northern Iraq.
Okay. And if anybody has not seen it, I encourage them to find it. I assume it's perhaps on a streaming basis, Dr. Sarah. But again, it's Pat, A Legacy of Love, and it's tremendous. And I've had the pleasure of seeing the documentary at a prior time at the University of Tennessee. But so over 8 years, and you've done a lot, and we could spend a lot of time on that. But we were able, and I was most fortunate to meet you at an espnW summit, I want to say 4 or so years ago, when as part of the CSPS, you manage and implement the Global Sports Mentoring Program on behalf of the U.S. Department of State. And that's where you were there with your group of 18 to 20 extremely impressive women from around the globe. Talk a little bit about it, because that's one that, and again, it's not about me, it just moved me. And again, I'm not trying to be overly gratuitous. It just moved me to what the program is. And I'd love you to talk a little bit about it, because I think it's under promoted, and not in a negative way, just I think it deserves a lot more exposure. And I'd love you just to kind of take us through the management of that. That too has been for 8 years, I think, 7 or 8 years.
It has. In fact, we were awarded a cooperative agreement grant with the State Department 5 days after we became a center at the university.
Really?
Yes.
I guess you did a good job of writing your grant.
I learned how.
Yeah.
That's right. 3 years of doctoral work and a year of a dissertation paid off in big ways. I couldn't be more grateful. So as we were launching the center, then Secretary of State Hilary Clinton and the State Department Sports Diplomacy Division put out a call for proposals. And at the time, the name of the proposal, or the name of the grant, was Empowering Women and Girls Through Sports. And there's a backstory to that, and I won't get into it, but let's just say that that I believe in divine appointments. And so I believe that things happen for a reason. And so when that call for proposals came out, we weren't even officially recognized as a center at the university. And certainly no one in the country knew of us because we didn't exist yet. So we filled out the application, and I don't know what other grant applications look like. We submitted a dissertation. We submitted 160 pages of full-on curriculum and monitoring evaluation and every detailed plan, and essentially presented something based on the 15 years of international work that I had been doing in partnership with many great organizations. And so it was funny because when we submitted the application, you know, there's that waiting period where the State Department and their panels are reviewing it. And every day we would come into the office and we would say, do you think we got it? And one day it would be, no way we got it. I mean, we're nobodies. No one knows of the work that we've done. I mean, there's no way. We're competing against big, well-established, amazing organizations. And then the next day we'd come in and we'd say, do you think we got it? And I'd say, heck yeah, we got it. There's nobody out there that cares more about this issue than we do. It wasn't, there's nobody out there better than us. It was, there's no one out there that cares more than we do. Let me give this as an example too, as a listen for your audience, because I think it speaks to the power of teamwork and what we talk a lot about in sport and in business, and especially in the grant world, this idea of collaboration and partnerships. And I think we talk a big game in this area of yeah, we should work together. But when push comes to shove, the resources are so few and so limited that I have found only a couple organizations who are actually willing to say, yes, let's go in this together. And so let me give you this example. Because we weren't established yet, we reached out to several other women's-based organizations that are working in the sport world. And in reaching out, I was asking them for a letter of support for our grant application. And most, I would say, politely declined and said, oh, we'd love to support you, but we're also applying for that grant.
Oh, really?
And I said, oh, that's great. That's fantastic. I'm so glad to hear that. You all do amazing work. Could I write a letter of support for you? And would you in turn write a letter of support for us? Every single organization said no. And so when they said no, I would say, explain this to me. Because what you care about is empowering women and girls through sports. And what I care about is empowering women and girls through sports. And one of us is going to win this. And whoever it is, don't you think we're even better with the support of one another? I can't possibly do everything as well as every other organization. I can do some things really well, but gosh, if you wrote a letter of support and we worked together, if we were so lucky to win it, how amazing would that be? And if you won it and we could support you in something that maybe we can fill a gap, how amazing would that be? And do you know, no organization was willing.
How many? How many did you talk to?
Probably 7 or 8.
Wow.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, the goal was to empower women and girls in sport. So was it about winning on there? I mean, yeah, okay, executing, or was it about the bigger picture?
Right.
That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. So I learned a lesson early that collaboration and the talk of it isn't necessarily what people actually mean. So anyway, but I think that's important. And I think, so nonetheless, I still wrote a letter of support for every single one of those organizations, because that's just true to who I am. Yeah. That if me speaking to them, if they were the right ones to win, great. Then how can I support that? How can I make what you do better? Because at the end of the day, we just want to make sure that we're taking care of women and girls around the world. So we were fortunate enough to be awarded the grant, which started in 2012. It has since evolved. There are 2 pillars. that the State Department funds, and it has now become the Global Sports Mentoring Program. Still with an emphasis on empowering women and girls through sports or gender equity for one pillar. The other pillar is empowering persons with disabilities or promoting the rights of people with disabilities. And so the Global Sports Mentoring Program has two areas of focus, diversity and inclusion, obviously a huge undergirding of both.
Right. And so how many, is it like 100? I forget that I had some notes here, but how many countries over those 7 to 8 years have you hosted women and girls from? It's like 70 or 80, I forget the number.
Yeah, so we're going into our 9th year, and between the two programs, the Empowering Women and the Disability Rights, we've trained 192 women and men from 84 countries now.
Wow.
So yeah, and they are doing some amazing things. I'm so incredibly just proud to walk alongside them.
And I know the program in its simplicity, and again, we could talk forever here. But there's a nomination process that the U.S. embassies across the world encourage women to submit. There's a selection process. There's a mentorship. So when the 18 to 20 women, I think you had 17 this past in 2019, was I had the privilege of working with. Then they do a 3-week mentoring program with some amazing companies around the U.S., from ESPN to Google to NHL, etc. But then I think what's impressive, and what I was able to sit in on, is they take those 3 weeks and create an action plan to go back and execute within their countries relative to their passion or the work that they're already doing. So, I mean, is there been a there's a lot, right? You've had 100 change, but is there a favorite story, or is there a favorite story or two that says, amazing, this young woman came in and did this and had dementia and went back and implemented a massive program with great success? Yeah,
gosh, there's so many. I'll give you 2 examples, brief examples. One from our disability rights program. We had a gentleman by the name of J.P. Maunez from the Philippines come. And he came as the founder of an organization that advocated on behalf of the deaf and hard of hearing community, because persons who are deaf and hard of hearing are the numbers of physical, domestic, and sexual abuse for children and women who are deaf and hard of hearing are significantly higher than the average numbers. And part of that is because very few communities have reporting mechanisms for someone who's deaf. So if you go to a police department to report abuse, there's no way to communicate because sign language isn't part of the reporting mechanism. So he was doing great work advocating for victims of sex trafficking, and abuse, and violence. But when he came on the program, his eyes were open to many, many, many other programs and things regarding adapted sports and adapted physical education. So he went back and he expanded his deaf and hard of hearing center into a very inclusive, broad range of disabilities, and started a dragon boat racing team that competes against able-bodied racers, but his entire boat is of people with different types of disabilities. So when his athletes get out of the boat, maybe they're a right leg amputee and a left arm amputee and a blind person and a deaf person. And so every single person, and they are winning races, international races against able-bodied teams. But what that's done is it's given a spotlight to disability and the abilities of people with disabilities across the Philippines and across the region. Then he's taken it one step further because he thought, how am I going to continue to fund this? So they've opened up a Dubby's Burger Shop. And people with disabilities are making these amazing, delicious, like 4 stacked cheeseburgers and everything. They're delivering them. They can take orders in sign language. And so now they have a social enterprise where they are self-sustaining their dragon boat racing. And so they've had lots of international press, which has really given just a lot of positive attention to the movement. Yeah, yeah. With our women's empowerment program, let me think about this, because let me give the example of Aline Silva from Brazil. So Aline she was raised by a single mom in a rough neighborhood in Rio, and her mom worked 2 or 3 jobs to support her and her sister. And one day her mom came home from work and couldn't find Aline anywhere. So she was calling for Aline, and Aline was 13 or 14 years old at the time, called her neighbors and said, "Hey, have you all seen Aline?" And they said, "No, but we'll go look for her." So they went out on the street and they found Aline laying down, face down in the middle of the street. And she had passed out from an alcoholic coma at 13. She was running the streets. She didn't have anywhere to go after school, no supervision, was hanging out with kids older than her. So her mom took her to the hospital. Luckily, the doctors saved her, but they berated the mother for being a horrible mother. And the mom said, "If you will help me put food on the table, I would be happy to stay home with my daughter, but I don't have the ability to do that." So she moved schools. She put Aline into a different school that had an after-school program in judo. And she excelled at judo. She was amazing. And she caught the attention of a wrestling coach. And this wrestling coach said, "Hey, have you ever thought about wrestling?" And she said, "No, I haven't thought about wrestling. I'm a girl. Of course not." And he said, "No, you could be a great wrestler." Today, Aline is Brazil's only silver medalist in the Olympics for wrestling for her country. So it took her on this path. So I was there, Dr. Ash and I were there in maybe 2016, giving a workshop to some of our alums at the time. And Aline came to the workshop as an athlete. She didn't speak any English at all. So she came up to us afterwards and she said, "How can I get involved in the Global Sports Mentoring Program through an interpreter?" And we said, "Oh, it'd be amazing if you could join us. But Aline, one of the requirements is you have to have a pretty strong command of the English language, because all of the mentoring and everything happens in English." And she said, "I won't always be a competitive athlete. I won't always have the opportunity to represent my country at the Olympics. But what I will always have is this platform and this legacy to make sure that every other young girl in Brazil doesn't have to grow up like I did, and that she also can see the power of sport." And she said, "Is there anything else that I need to be able to be a part of this program?" And we said, "No, you just need to learn English." And she said, "That's easy. I'll do it." And she didn't speak any English. I mean, none. So 2 years later, I'm reviewing, 75 or 80 applications from all over the world. And I see this name, Aline Silva. And to be honest, I never thought I'd see her again. And I thought, wait a minute, that's Aline from Brazil. So I read the application and I couldn't wait to get on a Skype interview with her to see. But in the back of my mind, I was almost already disappointed for her, not thinking she could have a good enough command to really excel. When we talked, her English was impeccable. She taught herself through Duolingo English just to participate in the GSMP while she was training for the Rio Olympic Games.
Wow.
So in 2016, she competed in the Olympics. 2017, she was on the Global Sports Mentoring Program. She's gone back and she has launched a wrestling academy for girls to empower young girls in her old community. And she teaches every single one of them English, knowing that knowing English will open up doors for young girls like her.
You know, Doctor, that's so touching. I mean, that's 2 stories. But that story alone is from a 13-year-old girl passed out from an alcohol poisoning to that. It just, the website, and that even doesn't do its own justice. But where can people go read more about the program? How can people get more involved? You know, I've been touching and just barely doing a little bit because I'm just moved by it, but I know I could do more. Where can people read more about it and more importantly, help get involved?
Well, thank you so much. And don't dismiss your contributions. You have come and taught workshops for us and for the ladies, and have been a tremendous blessing in serving on our board of advisors. You've just been an invaluable addition. So thank you for, I'll never forget meeting you at the summit and talk about humility. You were so humble. And so it has been wonderful to get to know you and to work alongside you.
Well, thank you. But it's my honor. It's my privilege.
Well, you're welcome. Okay, so to learn more about the Global Sports Mentoring Program, it is globalsportsmentoringprogram.org.
Okay.
And you can see everything about, and Alini's story and JP's story literally are one of the 196. Every one of them have amazing stories and are doing amazing things. So that would be the best place. And I should also say, the State Department funds this, but the Women's Empowerment Program is also done in partnership with ESPNW. So I just wanted to make mention of their investment.
And their financial as well as human resource investment?
So ESPNW's role is not a financial investment. Their role is to identify the mentor organizations. And so theirs is really a networking and connecting and identifying organizations that will serve as mentors.
That's great. How will this horrible global pandemic affect 2020? And I'm sure it already has in terms of bringing people over. I suspect bringing these women leaders over in October, which is generally the timeline, has probably been, I suspect, postponed or canceled.
Yeah.
What's the update as it relates to COVID and the impact of the program?
Yeah, so both of our programs, so the disability program that typically happens in the spring was canceled, and then the fall program for empowering women will be canceled. I choose to see this as an incredible opportunity and blessing for us to do some creative projects for and with our GSMP family around the world. And so you may be leading to one of them. One of the projects that we've actually had time to bring to life is a mapping project of disability rights, laws, and policies around the world, which I hate to say it would be a different website, but I'm happy to share that, because those that are working in the disability sport space or even want to create more inclusive PE programs or sports programs in your local community. And that website is sportandpeace.org. Sportandpeace.org.
That's on the bottom of the screen as we put this together. So those will be out there for those two viewers.
That's great. That's great. People can find a map if you want to see what's happening, and the rights and laws that protect people with disabilities around the world. You can hover over a country and not only see what the rights and laws are there, but you can learn about their Paralympics, their Special Olympics, their Deaf Olympics, and all of our alums. It pops up with a little bio about the ways that they're advancing the rights of people with disabilities in their community. So although the Sport for Community program in the spring was canceled, it allowed us to bring this to life, which will be a tremendous resource to our alums around the world that are really fighting on the front lines of the rights of people with disabilities.
That project, and fortunate to sit on your board of advisors and others that were on a call, I think a month or 3 or 4 weeks ago, relative to the anniversary, I think, of the ADA Act 30 years ago. And I think that was kind of your platform perhaps to launch it, but encourage everybody to go to the website, look at the tremendous work you've done on that and the impact on global. And I'm going to take that as an opportunity to read a paragraph that struck me, Dr. Sarah, from a letter that you had put on your website. And there's a paragraph here and talks about the implication, how you implicate the diversity and inclusion and how that is across all your programs. But you say here, we believe in what's possible, a world where gender, mobility, race, religion, and sexuality don't define individuals, but instead are celebrated qualities that enhance our shared humanity. in a society that often feels confined to our differences, we work diligently to create a more peaceful, equitable, and inclusive world through sport. Powerful. But I think it does summarize the amazing work you've done. You continue to do what you've done over 30 years. You're 15 years prior to the CSPS and the Global Sports. I mean, it's just uber impressive. And, I'm just, extremely honored to know you, continue to work with you. We could go on forever, Dr. Sarah, and, I want to keep this into a workable time, but I can't thank you enough for what you have done, the impact it's had on the global scale. I encourage everybody to get more educated on it. We'll continue to push out all that we can to greater awareness, but you should be congratulated for the phenomenal work you've done. I love your story from your college coach and how it motivated you, perhaps not immediately, but ultimately into what you've done. You've done an amazing job.
Well, thank you. And I cannot take the credit for what happens here. I have an amazing, we are a small team, but man, we are a mighty team of just young people that we call ourselves sporty peacemakers. And so I would be remiss not to mention the amazing team that's around me.
You've got a great team. And what's your motive? It's high fives and it's
flex it up. We're strong people making a better world, and it's all about the high fives. Everybody needs a high five in life. Gosh, if we just approach the world every morning with the mentality of a high five, that human connection and encouraging people to be and find their best every day, we live in a better world. And so high fives to everybody, because every single, even a girl from Bald Knob, Kentucky, right, can make a difference. And every single one of us can. We just need somebody to believe us and to walk alongside us and to be our teammate.
Well, there isn't a meeting I haven't gone in with you, or a session I haven't gone in with you, or I'm fortunate to have a training with where you don't high five, everybody stops and high fives, or takes a picture with your strength, where you don't end an email with high fives or whatever the case may be. So congratulations. Last question for you. Is there a plaque in your hometown acknowledging you? A town of 800, you've got to be the esteemed resident from Bald Knob, Kentucky.
I don't think so. But I am proud to come from there. It taught me a lot, and it's a great place to, to say, gosh, that it was there, that there was nothing else to do, and that was where my love of sport was born. And gosh, God used education and sports to open the world to me, and to give me a chance to just leave a tiny imprint on someone's life.
Good for you. You've done an impressive job. Another podcast, another episode will have to be the history of the name of the town, because that's very intriguing, but that's for another discussion. But Dr. Sarah, thank you for your time. Congrats on all the phenomenal work you've done, you continue to do, and I encourage all those that are watching and viewing this to get involved, because it's an impressive program that needs a lot of help and more awareness. But thank you so much for your time.
Perfect. Thank you. High five, Scott. It's great to see you again.
Sure.
Yeah. Take care.